And welcome in to the Wednesday, May the 4th edition of the Bottom Line Lexington podcast. Yes, I'll get the obligatory, May the 4th be with you, line out in the open. Congratulations, nerds, it's your day. Enjoy it. Locally, the Kentucky Derby draw for post positions will happen this afternoon. It still looks like a very antiquated system. They draw a piece of paper, and then they draw a number out of what looks like one of those little Yahtzee bottles, and then the horse who got picked gets to go up and pick what post position they want to go out from. Kind of reminds me of an old fantasy football league that I used to play in, and to determine draft order, we picked numbers out of a hat. And we had one guy, Mr. Conspiracy Theorist. Every fantasy football league has that one guy who thinks he's getting cheated at every turn. This guy was that guy. So we draw cards out of a hat for post position, and the guy goes, well, I drew a 7. The guy next to me on my left drew a 4. The guy next to me on my right drew a 6. You didn't mix these cards up. And then I'm like, dude, not everybody, when they put their hand in, takes the card that's on the top. The cards were mixed up. It's just happenstance. So then we had to put in a new rule that we would draw cards twice. The first time you drew cards was to determine the order in which you drew cards the second time. That's what whiners and conspiracy theorists do. They screw up the rules. I'm surprised that hasn't happened in this Kentucky Derby post position draw yet. But either way, I'm rooting for chaos and anarchy and controversy coming out of the post position draw today. And if you're looking for an edge, a betting edge, the number 17 post has never won the Kentucky Derby. Does that mean that they're screwed, or does that mean that they're overdue? That's your call. Hopefully, we'll have a pick on this race before the weekend. ESPN yesterday came out with something called their biggest busts of all time. I don't think they used the word bust, but they said unfulfilled potential. And of course, Sam Bowie from Kentucky was number 2 on the list. Now, I am not a fan of Sam Bowie. For my money, in 1984, his senior year at Kentucky, he was the 3rd best player on the team. Melvin Turpin was a better player. Kenny Walker, even as a sophomore, was a better player. The only thing that Sam Bowie did wrong was that he got drafted ahead of Michael Jordan. And that's why people look at him as such a big bust. The guy played 511 games in the NBA. He averaged 10.9 points a game. There's been a lot more celebrated players do a lot worse than that. But Bowie gets all this publicity for being a huge bust simply because he was taken ahead of Michael Jordan. And that's public perception. Now, you can talk about injuries all you want to, and Sam Bowie's career was derailed by injuries for the most part. He was never the same after missing those 2 years at Kentucky. But to sit there and say he's the number 2 bust of all time, now you're just getting carried away. They had some other names on this list, too. The number 1 guy was Greg Oden, Marcus Dupree, Ryan Leaf. There's some names on this list. My biggest bust ever has to go to Aaron Hernandez. He killed a guy. Kind of like from the movie Anchorman, when they had the big fight in the alley between all the news teams. Brick had a guy with a trident. He killed a guy. On the topic of unfilled potential and busts at UK in terms of basketball, since I'm contractually obligated to go over this stuff, I did a little research and I went back in the history from what I can remember in my lifetime anyway. You could argue Skal Labissiere from this year was the biggest bust ever at UK. Yeah, he got 6.6 points a game, but every single draft list and every single recruiting angle, website, magazine, whatever you want to call it, every one of them had him as either the first or the second best player coming out into college basketball last season. Nobody had him outside the top 3. And for him to get 6 points a game, 3 rebounds a game, and you can tell how valuable a player is, and you can tell how much a coach believes in a player when the chips are on the line. When Kentucky played at Kansas in that overtime game, Skal was nowhere to be seen until they had to play him. When they played Indiana in the tournament, Skal was nowhere to be seen until they had to play him, regardless of whether he started the game or not. When I was a kid, Kentucky had a guy named Richard Madison. They called him the Master Blaster. And he was a 5-star guy, McDonald's Parade All-American, played in all those games. And they said he'd be a number 1 pick in baseball. He'd be a number 1 pick in football. Just the greatest athlete ever. And I remember watching the first few games, and he immediately became my dad's whipping boy. Every time he'd show up on the court, oh God, here he is. He sucks, blah, blah, blah. And he did. For 4 years, he averaged 5.5 points a game. And people were like, oh, well, he probably finished strong. He probably had his best year when he was a senior. No, that was his worst year. He averaged 2.9 points a game as a senior. So he's my personal bust of UK basketball history, along with Scal. Some people might say Rashard Caruth, who came in as a much ballyhooed freshman, averaged 5.5 points a game as a freshman, then left to go to Oklahoma, then left there to go to Southern Miss, and then got busted for selling meth. I guess that's a bust too. So those are my 3 UK basketball busts. Scal, the Master Blaster, Richard Madison. Where's he at today? He probably still thinks he can play. And Rashard Caruth. UK football. ESPN came out with their FPI strength of schedule for the coming season. Kentucky ranks 28th. Well, I hope so, because they play in the SEC, which means they'll play one of the toughest schedules in America. That's why they have to throw in 3 cupcakes. ESPN FPI says they will finish 5-7 this year. That's familiar. A, what they finished the last 2 seasons, and B, exactly how many games I personally, on the air in Lexington, Kentucky, have said that they would win each of the last 2 seasons. I'm sure Kentucky fans still think they're going to win 7, 8, or 9 games again this year, just like they have the last few. Get your head out of the clouds, people. This is a 4 or 5 win team at best. I saw one website today that was trying to count games based on this ESPN FPI poll. They're already chalking up the Vanderbilt game as a win. The only games that Kentucky can truly count on as wins right now are the cupcake games, the games against the non-SEC teams not named Louisville. And yes, that counts Southern Miss, but I'm not completely convinced they'll blow them out of the water. Former President Bill Clinton showed up at UK yesterday and did a photo op with Coach Cal. Apparently, Coach Cal had to take some time off from those sweaty treadmill videos apparently he's been sending out to shake the president's hand. Coach Cal came out and said, I've known President Clinton over 20 years. Let's see, that puts that about the Monica Lewinsky time, right? Reds and Giants last night. It was the Bark in the Park promotion thrown by the Reds, where the fans could bring their dogs to the park. No truth to the rumor that one of those dogs was signed to throw in relief out of the bullpen for last night's game. John Moscott was scratched. John Lamb, he of the 9.22 ERA in the minor leagues, was called up to start. Bad news, right? No, he pitched well. 1 earned run, 6 innings. 1-1 going to the 7th inning. We turn it over to the Reds bullpen. You guessed it, Reds lose 3-1. But hey, the Reds bullpen set a major league record. 21 consecutive games with a run allowed. Congratulations to all you guys in the Red bullpen. You just set a major league record. By the way, our boy Caleb Cotham gave up 2 last night. Now his ERA is over 4. There's nobody down there with a decent ERA. The bullpen in 3 innings gave up 2 runs. That actually improved their ERA, which went into last night's game over 6.5. Could Blake Wood actually be the closer now? He pitched the last inning last night. Who the heck knows? Between a team that's not going to win more than 60 to 65 games and a bullpen in such flux, it's hard fantasy baseball-wise to have any of these relievers on your fantasy squad to try to vulture 2 or 3 saves for the rest of the year, much less 15 or 20. But for the Reds, this summer is going to get long, hot, and ugly. They were 5-1 at one time. Now they're 10-17. You do the math. That's 5-16. Today they'll play the beloved Businessman Special, which I love. I love to go to Major League. I used to do this in Atlanta all the time. Go to those weekday afternoon games. Those are the best, man. I love those so much. Today, the Reds will play at 12:35. Jake Peavy for the Giants. He, the former Cy Young winner, but an 8.81 ERA so far this year. Dan Straley, a surprise find for the Reds, 3.38 ERA. Giants minus 125, minus 130 in the desert, depending on where you shop. As I said, I'd never lay odds with anybody, but at this low number, I'd be tempted to go with the Giants minus 125. Still a game I'll stay away from because this Reds team, this is a 95-loss team, guys. I'm sorry. They just are. Speaking of the Reds, Pete Rose came out yesterday and said, Major League Baseball has invested money into the DraftKings daily fantasy sports websites and business, but it's not called gambling? Then what the hell is it? And that's a direct quote from Pete himself. I don't agree with Pete on everything, but I agree with him on this. Daily fantasy sports is 100% out-and-out gambling. But it has such a bad reputation that people just look at it and say, oh, that's just horrible. You can't do that. What's the difference between that and the stock market? What's the difference between that and playing the lottery? What's the difference between that and rolling dice at a casino? Nothing. They're all bets. You win and lose money based on the results. For Pete to be excluded from the Hall of Fame, but yet the Major League Baseball to endorse DraftKings and daily fantasy sports in which players actually invest money to either win or lose depending on who they pick, that's gambling. Pete's got a 100% correct point, but it won't change a thing. He'll never make the Hall of Fame, And whether you're for Pete or against him, you'd think after almost 30 years, they'd cut a guy a break. But they never will. Speaking of gambling, Super Bowl odds out after the draft. New England over Seattle in the Super Bowl, which would be a rematch of 2 years ago, is the favored matchup for Super Bowl 51. The team that increased their odds the most after the draft, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Curt Schilling added again on social media. Desperate times call for desperate measures, apparently. He goes on Twitter yesterday and says, "I will be happy to watch games via Twitter with anybody who'd like to." I don't know what that means. Does that mean you've got to pay him money and he comes to your house and watches baseball games? Because I know Curt Schilling needs the money. Does that mean he Snapchats? That mean he Skypes with you? What does he do? FaceTime? What does he do with you? Does he get paid for it? I'm sure he wants something for it. Poor Curt Schilling. I have a feeling it's going to end really bad for him. As soon as he left ESPN, he went straight to Fox. Fox said, no thanks, bro. He's got nowhere to go. NBA, Miami wins in overtime in Toronto. Big game for Dwayne Wade. Dude is 34 years old and doesn't look like he can get up and down the court, and he's still winning. Second half of his career has been amazing, especially if you look at his efficiency numbers. Still as good as anything you could ask for from a mid-30s player who's played as much as he has. Golden State also win. They go up 2-0 in their series. They were down 11 entering the fourth quarter. Fourth quarter, they outscored Portland 34-12, and they won by 11. By the way, that line, 10.5. That makes you want to give up gambling, ladies and gentlemen, because we had Portland plus 10.5 last night. Golden State was down 11 at the beginning of the fourth quarter. It was almost time to light up that cigar. That's a tough way to make a living, is betting on these NBA playoff games. NBA came out yesterday and said, in the final 13 seconds of Game 2, Oklahoma City versus San Antonio, the game OKC won, there were 5 blown calls in the last 13 seconds. These referees are allegedly supposed to be the best basketball referees in the entire world. And they blew 5 calls in the last 13 seconds? Who's out there? Tim Donaghy? By the way, Tim Donaghy, of course, everybody hates him for what he did. Look at his book. Don't buy it. Just go out somewhere and look at it sometime. Very interesting, especially from someone who's tried to win a couple dollars betting on games here and there over the years. Read Tim Donaghy's book. You talk about conspiracy theories. He's got quite a few. Some of them don't stick, but some of them do. Mac Daddy Stogie time. Since we have a short show today, we're going to go not 1, not 2, but 3 Mac Daddy Stogie locks of the night. You'll have lung cancer after smoking so many cigars after winning tonight. Baseball, late afternoon. If you listen to this early in the afternoon, Colorado at San Diego. It's about a pick'em. You're going to lay maybe 105, minus 110 top on either side. Cesar Vargas of the Padres is the real deal. He has pitched 2 games so far. He's looked great against St. Louis and Pittsburgh. ERA 0.87. Padres bullpen very well rested. Good spot for them at home. Give me San Diego is about a pick against Colorado. Also, Dodgers at Tampa. Dodgers won last night. They're going to win again tonight. Alex Wood, 4.82 ERA. Drew Smiley, 2.6 for the Rays. But this all points to the Dodgers, and you're getting a great price. Plus 150 on the Dodgers or somewhere in that neighborhood. So for every dollar you put up, you get $1.50 back. Give me the Dodgers at a great price tonight at Tampa. And NBA, Cleveland minus 7.5, minus 8, depending on where you shop over the Hawks. Cleveland won the first game by double digits. Not this time. The Hawks come back, possibly make this series 1-1, but they will keep it very close. They will cover the spread. They'll cover that number pretty easy tonight. That's your lock of the night. The Atlanta Hawks from the Dirty Dirty, my hometown, over LeBron and the Cavs. And that's it for the Wednesday, May the 4th edition of the Bottom Line Lexington podcast. Feel free to email us anytime at bottomlinelex@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at bottomlinelex. Go to our website, bottomlinelexington.com, and please subscribe to this YouTube channel. That's it for today. Until next time, may the winners be yours.